This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Listen, if the tremor hasn't hit all across the nation, it definitely hit the city, the Bay Area, Golden State, who's been known to catch some flack for earthquakes. But the ground shook as the Cleveland Cavaliers finally have climbed to the mountaintop and have done really what many have considered to be the unthinkable. And even to myself and my co-host, who I'm bringing on in a couple of seconds, we probably didn't think it was thinkable, but somehow LeBron James, he made this all possible. The city of Cleveland, they believed, and now it's become true. It's all in fruition. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the 2016 NBA champions of the world, pulling off probably one of the more improbable upsets and really the greatest of greatest historic comebacks ever done in NBA's history by defeating them on the road, down 3-1, winning this in the best of 7 series. Unbelievable. And listen, we got so much to talk about, obviously. And you know I can't do it without my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, Dime Man, contributor, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna and PNC, brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Are you done hiding, man? Are you done from going MIA after what we've just witnessed?
Son, that was an amazing performance in Game 7. And, I think proof positive of, the greatness of LeBron James and what the Cavaliers were able to do. We really saw history really in the final 3 games of this series. And that's why I said you just never know what's going to happen in the NBA, man. You just never know. But salute to all the fans listening to NBA Baseline. Thank you for tuning in. Game 7 was epic, and we have a lot to discuss and a lot to get into.
Definitely, man. And we appreciate everybody continually showing their love and support for the Baseline NBA podcast. Before we get into the show, just to give you our plugs, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We're available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM. Also available on Google Music. My man Shaw's got a channel, Shaw Sports channel on Roku. So if you have the Roku channel or the Roku box, be sure to go to the marketplace and download Shaw Sports. You can also capture and hear the Baseline NBA podcast. And listen, Shaw, I'm no longer calling LeBron James the king. I don't think that after what we've seen here, and we can talk about what this means to his legacy, I don't think that there's any question that he cemented himself arguably to be one of the greatest players of all time. And yes, I'm putting him in that conversation with guys like Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think it's well-deserved. To me, he's no longer the king. He is the Messiah. He basically threw it out there. You probably didn't find it in the scriptures, in the text. Maybe if you're a pulp fiction phenom and you had our man Jules quoting it very nicely, Ezekiel, they're basically in the book of James. He said, I'm here to bring a championship to the land of Cleveland. And that's exactly what he did. And listen, man, it wasn't epic in the sense that when you looked at what he did as his triple-double, what it magnified, it's just a culmination of the effort, the heart, and the willingness to want it this badly, to basically see it within the grasp, and to be able to accomplish what they've done, given the odds that were against them. It's truly unimaginable in my mindset. I never thought that LeBron James could take himself to that level, but he did, and that's exactly the reason why they're hosting the O'Brien Trophy.
Yeah, what it boils down to is you saw an epic performance from a historical all-time great. And I don't know how much people watch NBA TV, and I'm obviously an aficionado of the NBA, as you like to say, and I'm paying attention to that stuff all the time. And there's some guys who I like and some guys who I don't like. And Isaiah Thomas sometimes is one of those guys I can kind of live without. Isaiah Thomas, a great former Detroit Piston. He's on there and he's always talking about the old school X, Y, and Z. But there was a point that he made throughout the NBA Finals. He kept saying, it's like, listen, when you talk about players and guys who have gotten to the NBA Finals, the amount of times that LeBron has. He said that room is small. Like, you talk about all-time great NBA players. He's in that room. He's in that conversation. And said Isaiah himself is like, I'm not in that room. I can't get in there. I'm on the outside looking in, trying to eavesdrop and see what's going on. And that's what it boils down to. LeBron James played 47 minutes of a 48-minute contest, brought his team back from three games to one. And yes, he had help. Kyrie Irving was definitely a huge part of everything that the Cleveland Cavaliers were able to do in this series, and we'll definitely get to that. But what we witnessed was a silencing of the lambs, if you will. When people have, when they're young and they have like those issues on their criminal reports, and then those reports get thrown away, if you will. Everything that you can say negative about LeBron James is done. It's over. He has sequestered any negative talk or any negative narrative that you can throw in his way. He came back to Cleveland. He brought his team back from the depths of hell and being down 3 games to 1 and delivered an NBA championship to this team. It's amazing, and nothing else can be said about this man except for great and high praise, as you have already kind of heaped on him at the outset of this show.
Yeah, and let me also make mention about, when I emphasize using the word the Messiah, listen, I know people here, some of our listeners might be very heavily invested in their religion. By no stretch of the imagination or standard am I trying to put him above God. But what I am saying, in the realm of basketball conversation, he to me is the Messiah, not by prophecy, but just because of what we talked about all throughout this particular finals. And really, when you look at his career in totality, when LeBron James puts his mind to what he wants to do, there's virtually no one in the game of basketball capable of stopping him from doing it. It's going to take a collective effort, like the Golden State Warriors did last year, to be able to stop a person who's in this zone. And what this comes out to, and what this transcends to me, and I was thinking about this last night, is that his aura, his presence, his desire, his willingness to win transcended to a level that not only inspired others to believe that the Cleveland Cavaliers actually have this opportunity and have this chance, but at the most critical moment, the most critical time, the other guys on his team got it. They figured it out. They may not have looked like listen, we're going to sit here and we're going to have this conversation in a moment, Shaw, about how much of this was more about LeBron James and what LeBron James meant to what he's done getting us to this point, and a lot about what the Golden State Warriors did to allow themselves to get to this point. But I am taking nothing away from what the Cleveland Cavaliers have done. All I'm saying is that LeBron James inspired his players to play at a level that I don't think that if you send them anywhere else to go play for any other team, they will ever equate to what they had to do last night to win this NBA championship. And that puts him on a level that is beyond the conversations that you mentioned of Isaiah Thomas, beyond the conversations of Kobe, beyond the conversations of most of the great players in the game, right? He's beyond the conversation that we talk about Oscar Robertson. And I love Oscar Robertson. I love what Oscar Robertson means to the game of basketball and what he still means to the game of basketball. But even Oscar Robertson couldn't do what LeBron James has done over the last 6 years and has brought it to this point. And I'm not magnifying it because it's the Cleveland Cavaliers and it's their first championship in franchise history. It's not about that. This is basically the same group of guys that were there last year. And I don't think that he would have been able to pull these guys to do what they were supposed to do last year like he got them to do what they were able to do last night. And that says a whole lot because we weren't seeing it the first 6 games of this series.
Well, yeah, I think the caveat even to that somewhat is, something that we've talked about throughout the course of the NBA Finals, and leadership. And, his ability to stay calm with all the odds facing against him, with all the negative conversation and narratives surrounding him and his team and his city. And he was able to be the true leader And you heard it in his post-game comments. He said, listen, I needed to show that and keep my guys calm and understand that, we did have a chance. And if we're going to Golden State, well, we have to come back to Cleveland anyway, so why not come back and have to play a game? And that was after, going into Game 5, then following Game 6. And then, well, now that you've tied it up, well, hey, let's try to make history. Not too many teams are going to have an opportunity, not too many players are going to have an opportunity in their entire lifetime to make history like that and win an NBA championship, let alone come back from 3-1, let alone let alone do it on another person's court. And I think that's, one of the underlying themes that definitely need to be really kind of focused on when it comes to this. It was him as a leader, not just his great play, not the statistics that he put up, the triple doubles and the averaging 30 and 11 and whatever it was. It's not that. It was his overall ability to be a leader and to get people to follow him and believe in him and to get other people to perform at a higher standard to end up capturing Cleveland's championship. That, to me, I think is what really defines him as a player. Now, his legacy is not just statistics. It's his ability to be an absolute unequivocal leader of a franchise.
And let me also add something else to this point with regards to, what you just said in reference to this triple-double that he did, that he performed. His triple-double was not an impressive triple-double. His triple-double was impressive in the sense that he was he was an all-around player, all-around contributor. What was most impressive was the timeliness of the plays that he did execute when it mattered. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. When we question whether or not LeBron James is not confident in his jump shot, what does he turn around and do? He shoots a 3-point shot and he makes it. In a situation where the Golden State Warriors are just teetering on the brink of really trying to figure out a way to force this game wide open and give themselves some form of a cushion. In a situation where the Golden State Warriors are on a break in transition and they have an open layup opportunity to take the lead in this game, who comes with the key block out of nowhere? LeBron James. When the tone needed to be set at the beginning of the game about whether or not this Cleveland Cavaliers team is ready to compete, he blocks Steph Curry. And again, does the stare down to Steph Curry. And it's these type of things in a Game 7 situation where you could probably look at it and say, that's how it is. That's just a little bit. But it's on a much greater scale when it comes down to who's going to win this championship. And it's those key blocks. It's that key shot. It's the 3-point shot that he takes, getting Festus Ezeli off his feet, getting the 3 free throws in the midst of an important run for them to win the third quarter. These type of things are the things that you needed from your Steph Currys, from your Draymond Greens, from whoever else, your Kevin Durant, anyone else from the NBA. But for LeBron James, that's what you expected. You knew it was going to happen. You knew it was coming. It was a question of whether or not you were going to be able to thwart it and be able to stop it.
Yeah, and I love that point specifically because it was with all the great statistics that he put up, and they were lofty. You know what I mean? They were 29.7 points, 11.3 rebounds, 8.9 assists, 2.6 steals, 2.3 blocks through the course of the 7-game NBA Finals. But when it came down to it, it was the headiness of LeBron, like you said, leaning into Festus, who may or should have or should not have been out there, perhaps, to get those 3 free throws. But it was the defensive side of things, and that is really that next step. I think for anybody who's trying to be a leader, if you will, there's a lot of great offensive players out there, but there's not too many players who do it on both ends of the floor, and it can do it on that type of stage, and and have the physical abilities and gifts that he has. And this guy, he leaped, it seemed like 30 feet in the air to block that shot off the glass. I think Iguodala would have had potentially give the Warriors a lead. And, again, kudos to Kyrie Irving, because I think there was some stat that the teams went, I think, 1 of 17 combined when the score was tied at 89-89 before Kyrie hit that 3, his 3 being the 1 of 17, if you will, something like that. I mean, you can check me on that stat specifically, but it was a defensive play. And a phenomenal defensive play, and quite honestly, one of the greatest blocks in NBA history because of the time, the moment, and the stage in which it was done. And that, to me, again, it's just one of those things that separate LeBron James from being an MVP player to being an all-time great player. And that's where it is. And Stephen Curry is never going to be able to do things like that per se. And this is not a knock on, on Curry directly per se, but because he just doesn't have the physical gifts in essence. But LeBron has maximized every ounce of talent within his body, every ounce of effort within that he can give. He gave in this series. And again, we're not sitting here trying to be, LeBron nut swingers, because we've given him his share of criticism. But at the end of the day, we have to say, we have to kind of bow down and say, you know what? That dude's legit. He is everything that he said he is, and everything that people who are LeBron apologists have said. They got to feel really good right now, because that guy truly delivered, and I don't know how you can ever say anything negative about him ever again.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as our NBA Finals Game 7 post-game wrap-up. The Cleveland Cavaliers pull off the improbable, defeating the Golden State Warriors on the road. The first time in NBA history a team has come back from a 3-1 deficit in the series to capture the NBA title. All right, Shaw. So obviously, let's go ahead and continue our talks with regards to this Cleveland Cavaliers team, and then we can focus our attention on, Golden State. When we're talking about, we're talking about LeBron James, look, there's no question that he's definitely, you could kind of make the argument, in my opinion, for the purposes of the NBA Finals, that Kyrie Irving could be deserving of the MVP, because, here's my reason why. Okay, I understand everyone is fixated on the epic numbers that LeBron James did over the course of these last 3 games, but I don't think that part of this was possible had not Kyrie Irving, and we talked about this after Game 4. We talked about how Kyrie Irving, to me, was the catalyst to wake up LeBron James. Because remember, I was talking about how I just felt like Kyrie Irving wanted it more when the Golden State Warriors went up 3-1 in the series. I felt like even though everyone is getting on him because he's playing ISO ball, I just felt like there was a level of aggressiveness and there was a level of confidence that he is going to figure out a way to make shots to keep his team competitive until he relies on the Messiah to awaken and to lift the masses. And ultimately, that's exactly what happened. I don't think part of that would have been possible if LeBron James had to continue to keep questioning the belief factor that his guys are willing to step up to the challenge and to be able to compete throughout the rest of that series.
Kyrie averages 27 points a game, throughout the series, 4 assists, basically 4 rebounds as well, 2 and 2 steals. He was, arguably every bit as important, because he gave LeBron an acceptable running mate, if you will, and someone who can take some of the pressure off. LeBron can't go out there and score 100 points a game. That's just not what it is. But ever since it was, I think that was Game 5, when the series did fall on its head, if you will, Draymond Green gets suspended, and even parts of Game 4 where they said, we are just going to 1-4 pick and roll you to death. And Kyrie was up to the challenge, and he lambasted Steph Curry. He anytime Curry was on, he was like, yo, you're going to get this work. And he gave it to anybody, not even just Steph. Clay was on him a majority of the time too, and he gave Clay the work. He gave Harrison Barnes if he ended up getting switched out there. And he was able to hit clutch shot after clutch shot. And even something with Kyrie that I want to point out. Listen, the 3-point shot he hit to eventually, which was the game sealer, if you will.
I don't want to hear people knocking Steph Curry. To your point, Shaw, I don't want to hear people knocking Steph Curry on that. Steph Curry played great defense. That was just a hell of a shot. And listen, to the credit, I know we're not talking about the Golden State Warriors too much just yet, but I also want to put some emphasis on this. I don't know what people are expecting when we talk about great point guards and what point guards do. Great point guards are often known for facilitating, for play creating. They're not known for scoring. And you have 2 of the top scorers going at it. What do you think is supposed to happen? They're supposed to basically lock each other down? It wasn't going to happen. Steph Curry shook Kyrie Irving at times. Kyrie Irving shook Steph Curry many a times, right? But the whole point was who was going to make their shots more. And in this series, when it mattered the most, when we touted Steph Curry as the MVP, it was Kyrie Irving that was taking MVP shots. But under no circumstances am I going to sit here and say, well, Steph Curry ain't got no D. Steph Curry is a weak. Steph Curry was hanging as best as he could with Kyrie Irving given the circumstances. And I'm not even using the fact that Steph Curry is playing with a bum knee as an excuse. When you even watch some of the games, when you isolate and break the games down, he was hanging with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving was just hitting the shots when they mattered the most.
Right. And I think, to finish my earlier point, it was the decision making, I think, with Kyrie that outdid Steph Curry in this one. And obviously we'll talk about the Warriors in a second here too, but that three that he hit, it was extremely well defended. And we've seen Steph, Clay on their end, be extremely well defended and hit shots as well too. But even in that shot, Kyrie was, again, he took a normal 3-point shot. I think the shot clock was coming to an end as well too. And, I don't want to say it was a forced shot, but he kind of had to put it up, and he made an amazing shot that was very well defended. But even in that, you didn't see him 4 and 5 feet behind the line, trying to hit some of those home runs and hero shots that Curry and Clay were known for throughout the season, and more so even in the playoffs, especially because when it didn't work. And that, to me, I think was the difference really in this series, was the overall decision making and poise of a team that understood the stakes. And I think we maybe transition into this a little bit here now. It really was about what Cleveland did and how they were able to execute. And they basically did the same thing for the last 3 games. LeBron and Kyrie, you go, I go, you go, I go, and everybody else kind of pick up and fill in where you can. And Golden State didn't make the proper adjustments. And to some degree, and hindsight is 20/20, but some degree, something that we've been talking about, their own arrogance and in terms of the way that they play.
I was just going to ask you, is this a question of poise or was this a question of arrogance?
Yeah, it's all of it. I think it was poise, arrogance, and overall just decision making. And to their credit, Draymond, Steph Curry, even himself after the game said, Steph said, we tried to hit the home run. We tried to do. We tried looking for those dagger shots. I think everyone can remember, when Steph got switched onto Kevin Love, or Kevin Love got switched onto Steph, I should say. And Curry is just dribbling incessantly.
It's the same thing that we criticized Kyrie Irving for. We weren't doing that with Steph Curry because we're so used to Steph Curry, But let me add to your point real quick, Shaw. I think a lot of this too came down to decision making. When we're talking about the instinctiveness to do what you need to do, even in that final that with 10.6 seconds, and you need to get a quick shot off, he's still dancing with Kevin Love. And I'm like, I don't understand why you're dancing. You broke him. Take the shot. To me, I really felt like Curry was not comfortable even taking that shot because of the moment, because of the situation. And that to me just tells me that these guys were out of their element. They've never been down this road before. Even the 3-1 deficit to the Oklahoma City Thunder, I don't even think even comes close to the magnification that we're talking about where the Warriors are with the pressure mounting, losing at home, losing to the Cavaliers, losing in a series, in a situation, in a matchup that they wanted, and putting themselves in this position. I think it all came crashing down on Steph Curry at that moment in time, which allowed for his hesitance to not take that shot when he initially broke Kevin Love when the clock was winding down.
Yeah, it was one of the more frustrating things to see, I think, of the season, and something that I'm always going to remember, where he did have the space. He was still relatively far behind the line again, but then was like, nah, it's not good enough. And then dribbled again, and Love recovered. And then Love, to his credit, stumbled and flopped around, but stayed with him relatively. And I think he didn't want to try to fire up over somebody who was 6'9", 6'10", and didn't feel like he had the angle. And and ended up being just such a piss poor possession. It's one of the things that I'm going to remember from this series. That possession specifically, I just said, what's he doing? And you're just not used to seeing an MVP just really shrink in the moment, if you will. And I don't use those words lightly. I still think Steph Curry is a great player, still one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter of our generation. But that was not an MVP lead me to the championship in Game 7 type play. And
we
that
said
really
that's exactly what it needed to be. We said that's exactly what he needed to be. Is he needs to be the best player in the game. It's interesting because I had a conversation with my cousin, with regards to what I think each team's respectively needed. And I said, there's a difference between being the best player in the game and being the best player on your team. In the early beginning of the matchup, in this Game 7, Steph Curry looked like he was going to be the best player in the game. And then he just disappeared somewhere between the end of the first quarter. And obviously the magnificent performance by Draymond Green overshadowed that. I felt like Curry was content being where he was, rather than helping to elevate what Draymond Green did for them so that the Warriors are playing at another level. And that's fine. If you feel like this is where you need to be, you clearly are not the best player in the game right now. But at this juncture in a game 7, you need to be the best player on your team. And in that second half of basketball, Shaw, that is arguably one of the worst performances that I've seen a player, not just on an MVP level like Steph Curry, but just in general as a point guard. Some of the decisions that Steph Curry made when the Warriors were up were so egregious that it led to giving the Cavaliers hope and opportunity for them to win this basketball game. And it was so frustrating to see because, again, we talk about how, you know me, man, I pester about this with Steph Curry because I feel like he's done so much in the 2 years because he's always been criticized for turning the ball over. Right? And I felt like these 2 MVP years, the reason why he is where he is, not just for the shooting, is because he was making better decisions passing the basketball. He does do that little hero passing now and again and everything like that. But for the most part, he's kept it down. And we have just seen it rear its ugly head so hard in the last 2 series, in the Western Conference Finals and again in the finals, which are 2 of the most uncanny time frames I would ever expect that from Steph Curry to happen.
You couldn't be talking about the behind-the-back pass in the corner to Klay Thompson.
Most indubitably. Oh, yes.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, like I said,
the Warriors are up at that point, Shaw. And they're coming right out of a time. What are you doing trying to throw that pass? What is the point of that pass? It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And even
no point.
You heard, I mean, I'm not sure if you heard the audio, but even the crowd was like, oh. Even Cavaliers fans are like, huh? Everyone's like, oh. Because you know what that was? That was old Steph Curry that they saw. And I just don't understand why that Steph Curry would be there in this moment. He didn't need to be there. He didn't buy a ticket for this. And that to me is what stands out. I mean, you're talking about his decision making on that shot. That pass to me is what will stand out as one of the worst passes attempts, one of the most arrogant and egregious passes I've ever seen because it was so unnecessary. I don't know why you would even think that would even be a good play, even if you wanted to. You're 10 feet from behind the 3-point line trying to throw that pass on the baseline. Klay Thompson is not even set for that play. And you're throwing that pass? That makes no sense. Again, if we ever had Steph Curry on the show, and he'll never sit down and want to be rated by this and get laced with it. But I would ask him that question. Like, what were you thinking when you were trying to throw that pass?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it was one of the most ill-timed things I've ever seen, you know, really. And again, I say these things, I don't say them lightly because, you know, I was where I was and, you know, in an outdoor restaurant and watching and again, the entire place. And I say not everyone's, you know, these great basketball minds, people, they're just fans and that's fine. But everybody is just dumbfounded like, well, what was that? You know, like that right now. And, you know, we said that going into, you know, in our game 6, you know, recap and then preview of game 7, the Warriors needed to get back to more of a fundamental type of basketball game, and they could still shoot some of their shots, but again, it didn't need to be 35, 40-foot 3-point shots. It doesn't need to be behind the back passes into traffic or trying to thread the needles per se. It's, wait for the defense to rotate, use consistent ball movement, use your ball screens and your pin downs, and you should be good.
Sean, I've said
they
this.
Didn't do that.
I've said this numerous times, all throughout the night last night. I've said this numerous times, even when the Warriors lost Game 5. They are making this way harder than it needed to be. This wasn't, and so now we can really get to the heart of this. Look, Cleveland fans, I applaud you. You have endured 54 years of just, misery, okay? And you have finally achieved it. You are there. Bask in it, glow in it, relish in it. Remember this basketball team, okay? Remember these guys. They have helped put you guys in the premise in the conversation of where we wish all of the NBA teams will be at some particular point. Teams like the Toronto Raptors, right? Teams like the Memphis Grizzlies are hoisting a trophy, okay? Being NBA champions. But let's not make any mistake about this. If you really look at this for what it is, minus the performances of LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, the Cleveland Cavaliers were not the best basketball teams between the two of them. This was a situation where the Golden State Warriors completely played outside of themselves. They made this thing way harder than it needed to be, and they gave Cleveland every opportunity to win this championship because they damn sure didn't act like they wanted it. Maybe each individual at certain points during certain junctures during the series showed up and wanted this thing to happen. But from games 4 on through, the Warriors completely lost their way because you can break down even in game 7. The Warriors were running circles on the Cleveland Cavaliers defense. And I just could not understand for the life of me why they continually kept going away from the formula that got them those easy baskets they were getting at will. At some point, you can tell that the Cavaliers' defensive will was going to break. That no matter what LeBron James could possibly do, block shots off of the Raptors if he wanted to, it would not stop the rest of the Warriors running rough shot on the Cleveland Cavaliers defense. But somehow, some way, the Warriors bail them out by making an idiotic pass, by doing something foolish, by stop playing defense on their end of the basketball. The guys that they worked hard for in the first half to nullify, Kyrie Irving was non-existent in the first half. J.R. Smith was non-existent in the first half. LeBron James was really the only person that was doing anything collectively. Okay, Kevin Love had a couple of early buckets, then disappeared in the second quarter. And then when the second half goes and you have a 7-point advantage going into halftime and then you come out of the break, the first person that is jacking up 3-point shots and making them is J.R. Smith. The next person that you let running off points is Kyrie Irving. How is it that your defense, who is suddenly stopping these guys, and it wasn't like they changed anything from the shots that they were taking before, the shots just became easier because you stopped playing defense. And this to me is just an indictment on how the Warriors, and we talked about the word arrogance. Arrogance to me is like they're confident. We got that 7-point lead. We're going to run back in here and do what we got to do and close these guys out. They lost their principles and they allowed the Cavaliers to hang around when they should have taken that game in the third quarter.
And I think the another point to that too is, like you said, with their defense, is they didn't really adjust. There were times where they would double, LeBron, and they'd wait for him to get into the post or get into lane to send it. But they allowed LeBron to operate in space way too often, and their over-reliance on what their defensive principles were that worked in years, well, I guess a year ago, and then for maybe the first couple of games of this series, they just decided, well, we're going to ride and die by this principle. And they didn't really do much to adjust or to change that and to try to knock LeBron off his game. And again, LeBron didn't have an efficient game. He shot 9 of 24 from the floor, if you will, but really, and they didn't really crowd enough and didn't do enough switching with their defenses, enough doubling. And when they did, you saw times where it was difficult. LeBron did have 5 turnovers, but they weren't consistent with it. And like you said, those mental breakdowns, especially in the game 7, going against the best player in the game today, and arguably one of the all-time greats of all time, he will find a way to beat you if you're not consistent, especially in all aspects of your game. And then when your two guns, Steph and Clay, they're not firing on all cylinders, and not to mention, and not complimenting the outstanding performance Draymond Green gave at 32, 15, and 9. It seemed like he couldn't miss a shot in that first half.
There's just no excuse.
Like, there is no excuse for you to not step up and not do the things that you need to do. And again, this is on everybody. I mean, Curry gets and deserves a hefty amount of the blame, especially for his decision making. The team only had 10 turnovers, but he and Clay had 7 of them. So take that as you will. And then
but
it also goes down
Shaw,
to,
it's not even that. 4 turnovers by Steph Curry. At least if nothing else, he was consistent in this NBA Finals. I mean, he consistently would turn the ball over 4 times in the course of a game. It's just when he was turning the ball over. It's just and just again, the type of turnovers. Let me also add this real quick on those type of turnovers. Curry's turnovers were momentum changing turnovers. Let's use that terminology, because whenever Curry was turning the ball over, like he did on the one that I'm saying is the TO heard around the world, in my opinion, the other turnovers were transitional turnovers, the type of turnovers where Steph Curry was left alone having to guard a 3-on-1 break because people were reading Steph Curry and him telegraphing the passes. If LeBron James is intercepting it, he's already got 3 guys leaking out on the outlets ready to roll. And to me, you just can't do that. You've got to know you turn the ball over like this is what's going to happen on the opposite end. And to me, they never did anything per se to adjust to that. Like immediately just foul and just give it up, right? Rather than allowing the Cavaliers to run the break and then execute on the basket. That to me is part of the things that I just felt like were lapses in the mental awareness of what the Warriors should have been doing in order to stave these type of situations that were giving the Cavaliers second chances and opportunities to continue to push the Warriors to the brink of mental breakdown.
Yeah, but again, it's on everybody. It's on Curry, it's on Clay, it's on Steve Kerr. For not making the proper adjustments for the personnel that was out there at times, and not really taking a stranglehold of this team. Listen, you know what? I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Tyronn Lue outcoached him and did all this stuff. I mean, this really was about LeBron and Kyrie to me, and people have different debates about that per se. Lue put in some different schemes and things like that, but
you mean that one where he took out Kyrie Irving like in the fourth quarter? That was, whew, I tell you, boy.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I don't think Lue was amazing as a coach today, but the adjustments he made seemed to work. And
injecting Mo Williams into the lineup.
Yeah, that too. But he was very physical. If you watch the tape, and I was watching a bunch of different stuff, on going into in Game 7, you're saying it wasn't just Curry, not hitting his shots. A lot of that was from the physical breakdown that he received by guarding, trying to guard other guys and being ran through picks and being held and just pushed around by JR and Tristan. Things that you don't see, in the course of the game unless you're really watching, or again, unless you go back and look at the tape. He was getting physically just beaten up. And all that was, kind of Lue's mantra, probably from the old Phil Jackson schools, like, hey, hit this guy. Make sure he feels you when he's trying to get through.
And again, and to your point, Shaw, to your point, I'm sorry, not to interrupt you on that, but to your point, this again now brings us back to, and I know we'll eventually talk about this down the road, that the NBA needs to be consistent. If you weren't doing this to Steph Curry during the regular season, to now starting to allow this to happen, to me is nonsensical in my opinion. And if you're an NBA player, you shouldn't have to complain like that, but we shouldn't be subjected to that kind of nonsense. Like those type of picks, to me, like the Warriors should have made adjustments and should have equated that kind of physicality back. They waited too long to start doing that. But if you are the NBA, this cannot go on, because that is not how the end result should be when you're matching up teams like this who are pretty much similar in each other's respects, okay? But to me, that should not be happening. Not because I'm saying, we want to preserve the MVP, and has nothing to do with that. It's a matter of being consistent with the way that the game is being played and executed, because you can clearly see the Cavaliers are pushing this thing as far as it could be taken, and the fact that the referees never curtailed that to me is not good. That's an indictment on the way that the NBA is allowing the officiating to go on, especially through the course of an NBA playoffs, which is your highest TV generatings that's happening. That should not be happening.
Yeah, it's a conversation that needs to be had, but I think I was watching the starters and they said, well, the Warriors can't really complain, because at the end of the day, how they got to where they got to is really kind of a lot of the same things. It's the Bogut's, it's the Draymond Greens who set those screens and those pin downs and those back cuts for Clay and Steph to get open a lot of times. When you wonder how Steph and Clay got open, it's not because, they just outran somebody. It's because, there's some physicality on the screeners that are being used from Golden State. And yeah, not everything is clean. It's just like holding in the NFL. It can be called in every play. Illegal screens could probably be called in every single play. So the Warriors have definitely gotten away with some of that, over the last couple of years, and it caught up to them. LeBron and the Cavaliers just out physicaled them. They were just rougher. And maybe they got away with some stuff as the referees didn't necessarily want to be involved. But, again, when Curry's the MVP, I understood Curry's argument at the end of Game 6 and where he was trying to go with it. But, like I said, I think it's one of those things, if you see that's how it's being officiated, you have to kind of figure out a way, okay, well, what are we going to do now? We can't just sit here and hope it gets better. You have to fight back. And that's my indictment on the Warriors is that they didn't, and Kerr himself, he didn't find the right attitudes or didn't push the right buttons, if you will, to fight back. And they just were rested on their laurels and said, okay, it'll be okay. Our home crowd will get us over it. Okay, Steph or Clay will hit one of these big threes and that'll be the dagger. And it didn't happen. The Cavaliers kept pushing, they kept coming, and they deserved the NBA championship as a result.
Definitely, man. All right, so let's go ahead and break down, the guys that, we haven't talked much about Steve Kerr, but we can obviously say that we say everybody on Golden State can get it. Even Steve Kerr, he can get it. The thought process to play Festus Ezeli, I get it. You played him the first couple of minutes, and that's really all he was good for, was a couple of minutes. But the fact that you decided to play him in the second half, I have no idea what that was supposed to mean. You brought him back in there in a situation where then on the pick and roll switch, LeBron James has Festus Ezeli, and Festus Ezeli does, what dumb centers normally do, jump up like you're going to try and block a damn 3-point shot. I have no idea what the purpose and the premises of that. You're already 7 feet tall with a wingspan of 8 feet. If LeBron makes a 3-point shot over your damn outstretched hands, fine. But the fact that you're jumping to try and block a shot, I have no idea. Just some of the rotations that Kerr put together in this game 7, I really scratching my head. And listen, I know people were talking about, well, Ezeli should have never started. I don't think that was the case. I think at some point you needed to have Ezeli in there to play. I think playing him in the beginning was fine because I think it set the tone, allowed Iguodala to come in and do what he does. But then to play him at any other parts in the second half, to me, felt like an act of desperation and not an act of strategy.
No, I mean, it was. They didn't have, I think, much choice. Varejao went out there. He played 8 minutes, but they tried to go with their small ball lineup for the majority of the game. Ezeli and Varejao, played combined, I think, 19 minutes or so. And it's very much indicative of how the Warriors have played throughout this series,
but Sean, I still don't understand why you never played Brandon Rush. I mean, if you're not going to compensate for not being able to play a true big, you have no confidence in Varejao, you're not planning to play Speets. I mean, clearly, McAdoo is outclassed in this situation, would have done no good. I would have tried playing Brandon Rush. I mean, he's an adequate guy that could probably, at least he has a little bit of length in him. He's not going to be the most versatile defensive player. His lateral movement is not all of that great, but I think he's a hell of a lot better option if you're going to pull the trigger to run with him or Leandro Barbosa than to be sitting there trying to run with Festus Ezeli for 11 minutes in a Game 7 situation where he clearly checked himself out after the first 2 minutes of the game.
Yeah, and I think, with Kerr and the Warriors, it was a matter of, how much defense do they want to sacrifice, and this game really turned out to what I would have predicted in Game 6, where it was a much tighter, low-scoring affair, and maybe that's indicative of it being Game 7 because, nerves are there and, people just start to, it's harder. They feel that immense pressure, if you will. But I feel like with Kerr, he just didn't have the trust in some of those guys to go out there from a defense standpoint. But offense was really, hard to come by in this game. So a guy like Barbosa definitely might have been able to help maybe. And maybe if Rush gets out there and he hits a couple of jumpers, from the corner, if you will, because he doesn't really do much right now other than shoot the three. Maybe he helps out to some degree, but it's like I said, it's all a matter of perspective with it now. And we went from, I think it was in Game 2, where we're talking about Kerr is pressing all the right buttons and getting all this bench production, to now here we are at the end of Game 7 with the Warriors on the losing end and saying, well, damn, he didn't really live up to expectations. He didn't get enough from his role players and his bench guys, and that goes all the way back down to Livingston, goes back down to Harrison Barnes, all of them. Nobody did enough, in this situation to give the Warriors a boost that they needed. And then they just got steamrolled by LeBron James and Kyrie Irving.
All right, Shaw, real quick, what do we talk about now with regards to Harrison Barnes? Restricted free agent. This is probably one of the worst performances that we've seen in a stretch of games for Harrison Barnes. We've seen him struggle, but we know what he can actually bring to the table. I just think that there's a mental block there. I don't know if whether or not he's just not comfortable being the 4th, 5th option, really not being solely dependent upon. And this was a situation where Harrison Barnes could have easily shined. He had so many opportunities in Game 7 to really help this Warriors basketball team either take the lead or help push a lead. And he basically provided neither. I think what's more frightening is the fact that he looked like a defensive liability out there. He didn't look nearly as physical as I'm sure he's capable of being. And I'm just wondering if his time is up with the Golden State Warriors, regardless of whether or not he's going to be offered some kind of deal for some other team. Would it be best suited that he probably go and play somewhere else? Or do you think that he can find his way if he does decide that he can, the Warriors would match whatever offer that's going to be made to him out there to still play for this team?
I think Golden State is going to try everything in their power to retain him. This is a team that feels like they blew an opportunity and would love to kind of run it back, if you will, and come back again. Barnes himself, though, if you're looking at the free agent market, and we can even kind of compare this to Kevin Love to some degree. So Love was a feature guy, and it's the opposite for Barnes here. Love was a feature guy, came here is now the third option, if you will, and has had varying degrees of success. Barnes was never the feature guy, and I think he even dropped his stock, coming out of college, where he was almost sure to be a number one pick, and that didn't end up happening. And people see him now as a role guy in Golden State. So if you're a guy with Steph and Clay on your team, and even Draymond Green now, you want to say, and you can't hit the open shots that you received. I mean, he was 2 of 4 from the 3-point line, but 3 of 10 overall, and he still doesn't have an effective post-up game. It's not really fast enough to beat you off the dribble. He's got this kind of in-between game right now, and you're not thriving, especially on the highest stage, when you don't have all the pressure on you, per se, when, those other guys clearly have all the pressure. I think he's hurt his stock, and I know he's hurt his stock, but there'll be some team out there that's desperate enough to say, you know what, hey, we need to try to make you one of our guy, and I don't think he can be the number one guy. I don't think he's even the number two guy. But somebody's probably going to make him that.
Right. So, but now, Shaw, because the cap is now up to $96 million, right? And what we're talking about here is that teams are going to throw more money out than necessary. I don't know if it makes any sense, because it isn't like, we saw what happened when the Houston Rockets decided to let Chandler Parsons go because the Dallas Mavericks threw a gigantic lump sum amount of money Parsons' way as a restricted free agent. And it probably, if anything, worked out for the better for the Houston Rockets, because clearly now we see what's happening with Chandler Parsons, who, I would still have a high stock value for what he can bring to any basketball team. But when you look at what might happen here for the Golden State Warriors, are we led to believe that the Warriors are really that determined to keep Harrison Barnes? If the idea is that they were willing to go out and try to see if they can get them Kevin Durant, and they're going to make a push or a play, I mean, seriously, it means that they're not going to be thinking too highly of Harrison Barnes. So, I mean, is it more?
If Durant's in play, it's a done deal. There's a lot of people on this roster who may not be there next season if Durant is all in play, because they just won't be able to afford him, and even the playing time that won't necessarily be there. So I think that's the first stop, if you will. You figure out how much of a real opportunity and chance that you have at KD, and then you can make a decision from there. But now I think they're going to want some sort of hometown discount on Barnes this year if you're Golden State Warriors, and I think they'd be entitled to it. Now it's going to be a matter between he and his agent whether or not that if they want to give it. So I think Chandler Parsons is a great example, because the argument can make Parsons is clearly a better overall player, but Parsons can't stay healthy.
Right.
So it's like, all right, well, do you want 10-5 a game, for 75 to 78 games a season, or do you want 15-6-4 a game for 50 games during the regular season? You know what I mean? So it's a really interesting question with that. But Parsons clearly, I mean, not to point out Parsons specifically, but that's the class we're talking about in terms of that small forward, power forward type player. I don't know what Barnes really wants at this stage right now, because I'm sure he wants his money, but he's not entitled to it, for lack of a better phrase. He's not entitled to it if he stays in Golden State. He can get it somewhere else, because I just feel like there's going to be a market for him one way or the other. But if you're the Warriors, you're like, hey, bro, listen, we'll give you 10, we'll give you 12. We're not going to give you that $15-16 million contract that you were looking at, and even 10-12. I think it's very generous. I think it's fine, but it just seems to be what the market is going to bear, especially with the new and an escalating cap. But I don't know. What's your opinion on it? I mean, would you pay Harrison Barnes a max contract now if you're Golden State to retain him and you have no chance at KD? Do you give Barnes a max just to keep him on the roster?
Absolutely not. No way. Not because I don't like Harrison Barnes. I just don't believe that Harrison Barnes is as important as we're making him out to be at this particular juncture. I think we're enamored with what this Warriors team has done as a team, and we feel like every person is important within the elements of making that team what it is. But quite frankly, I think Harrison Barnes is a replaceable piece. If nothing else, in the 2-3 years that we've seen him play, we've seen him show up and then we've seen him disappear. I mean, this is his 4th season now in the NBA, right? He basically helped this Warriors team, and he showed that he has the premise, the athleticism to be like the next Andre Iguodala. On some other basketball team, he could probably be starting and averaging 20 points per game is the upside potential we were talking about. Then after the Warriors signed Andre Iguodala, it's like it's not even the sophomore jinx. It's just like the sophomore blackout. He just disappears off the face of the map. And at a time where we're talking about this growth process, he then suddenly turns it around and has a great bounce back year. But then now this is another indictment on Harrison Barnes and the fact that this type of inconsistency is not deserving of someone that's expected to receive a max deal. He's just lucked into real good timing that the NBA has got a lot of money to throw around. But I just personally feel like if there is a trade that can be met where you can put a valuable, reliable piece that can give you the same thing that Harrison Barnes is giving you, I'll roll with that. Because what you want is a guy who is going to take the shot under pressure, who's going to show poise. You know, somebody at some point, the pressure's got to come off of Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. Everybody knows that they're going to be the go-to guys. And now with Draymond Green, who I know is going to get better with his offensive game, you can clearly see he is going to be a force at the 4 spot. And he's going to continue to be that way as long as he stays healthy. At some point, the pressure is going to have to come off of these guys. And guys like Harrison Barnes, if you're not capable of hitting your shot, if you're not elevating your game to that point where we're putting you in the conversation, like we talked about Klay Thompson in the conversation of Steph Curry, then I just think that he's a replaceable piece. I think you can find someone for that same kind of money to give you the same things. We've seen it now with guys like Jay Crowder, with guys like Damari Carroll. Harrison Barnes to me is no different. The only difference from this is he's a part of a team that won 73 games this year, 67 last year, and is a part of an NBA championship team. But he still has not exhibited championship caliber performances through a hand stretch of games that makes me feel like he's going to be deserving of any kind of max deal from anyone.
Yeah, well, I like that. You know, I think those are great comparisons. You know, he doesn't play the defense that Crowder or Carroll play. And he's not as offensively talented as Chandler Parsons is. So he's somewhere in between those two spectrums, if you will. And it would be a very interesting question. You know, I think that we can get into the off season when we try to evaluate some of the free agents that are out there. But the caveat to that too is also that, you know, some free agents, some players specifically are more valuable to their specific team. You know, I think Joe Johnson, you know, all those years with the Atlanta Hawks, okay, he wasn't a max player, but to the Atlanta Hawks he was. You know, they needed him because, hey, you know, what else were they going to do? They're going to fall into the lottery, you know, without him. But I don't think Barnes is a max player for the Golden State Warriors, and it'll be interesting to see if he tries to force that issue, if you will, to keep them on a team where they can replace his numbers and the things that he does. And overall, in the grand scheme of things, they need to not replace, but definitely upgrade a lot of that front court as well. And I think Bob Myers and their staff is definitely going to have to look at that in general.
Zealy, done. Spates, done.
Yeah. Like Barajal, everybody, yeah. You're going to kind of clean house with that whole front court and see where you can get value. You know, they do have a first round pick at the end of the NBA draft. I'm sure they'll also now start to get active, you know, as we move towards the draft in general, and maybe trying to see what else is out there. You don't know, you know, what they're able to pull off. But I think they know that that's an area of need that they need to address, you know. And, you know, moving off the Warriors real quick, let's talk a little bit about Kevin Love. Listen, 30 minutes, he had 9 points, but he had 14 rebounds, four of those rebounds being offensive, 3 assists as well too. And he wasn't supremely impactful from an offensive standpoint, but he did things that I think we were clamoring for him to do in trying to have some sort of a presence out there. You were clamoring for him,
definitely. I was hoping. I was just hoping, because he, you know, you can get off his back. But yes, you were clamoring for a little more love. A little bit more love goes a long way.
I'm gonna throw you one of those meaningless stats out there. The meaningless plus minus. Well, guess what the best plus minus of anybody, you know, on the floor last night?
Kevin Love. Yeah.
Kevin Love plus 19. Hey man, listen, we'll see what it means for the Cavaliers. I mean, it's all love and, you know, for lack of a better phrase, you know, it's all great and gravy right now as that they've won the NBA championship. But they're gonna have to look at their roster as well too. You know, I think Jefferson, JR is opting out as he already said. You know, again, is Dellavedova somebody that they try to move in the offseason? Mo Williams is probably going to opt into his contract, but, you know, they try to move him after that. And then the big question is, what do they do with Love? Do they feel like, okay, he did enough where he's needed. And we talked about it earlier. Is he somebody who they need for the regular season and then maybe other parts of the playoffs? And then, depending on the matchup, they figure out what they do with him. And that's not a superstar or max player to me, but his contract is locked. It's already a done deal, and he's locked into now, I think, 4 years there. So let's see what they do with Kevin Love in the offseason.
I will say this, that if you have, look, the LeBron James that we saw over the last 3 games, you're not going to see through a course of a regular season. So and this is part of the reason why it was so important to see Kyrie Irving get off the way that he did, because you know that he's capable of being that kind of guy. As long as he stays healthy, he's capable of being that kind of guy. And the Cavaliers are going to need that eventually at some point. We don't know how long LeBron James plans to stay with Cleveland. We don't know, where his career might lead to or where it might take him, because doing this, quite honestly, I feel like, if you want to continue to keep playing the game of basketball because there's personal achievements and accolades that you wish to accomplish, by all means continue to do it. But I do this, you know what I'm saying? I'm just waiting for them to just pretty much give me the city of Akron, and I'm just going to pretty much walk away from the game. You know what I'm saying? I can just go on and start doing Space Jam, 2, do Space Jam 3, 4, 5, and 6, probably do like Kobe and run a studio or something, whatever. But at this particular juncture, if you have this kind of front court with Kevin Love and LeBron James, it is a very formidable front court. I think Tristan Thompson, he still has room for improvement, albeit I feel like he's just, who he is. No more, no less. So a lot of this is going to come down to, who are you pairing Kyrie Irving with? Who are you basically, because if you're telling me that the foundation is going to be Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, I'm beginning to wonder now, is this really what Kevin Love is going to be as a Cleveland Cavalier? And if that is the case, then we're going to lose out on a lot of great Kevin Love games, great Kevin Love performances, because what the Cleveland Cavaliers need from Kevin Love, I don't think Kevin Love needs to be given to the NBA. You know what I'm saying? He's going to dummy his game down, and we're going to lose out on a guy who we were talking about as a clear 1A type player. He's going to feel like a 1B, 1C type of player playing on this roster. So, yeah, I think at some particular point, he has to even weigh that into consideration, as much as we're talking about how the Cavaliers have to weigh that into consideration.
I think that's a great point. Do you sacrifice the potential of going into the Hall of Fame, if you will, for rings or a chance? Not necessarily rings, but a chance at multiple rings and multiple titles. That's something that Love will have to figure out. I think it'd be very interesting to see what they do over the summer. I can't imagine that they'd make a move now, especially that they won. And then what happens next season? Do they get back to the promised land and then deliver another championship? And then, at some point, when does a guy entering his true prime say, okay, well, 2 rings is enough. I need to go out there and get these stats. And I don't know if Love strikes me as that type of person or that type of player, and he may end up sacrificing, the better part of his career for opportunity to win rings. And kudos to him if he does. And I said, I think I'm split on that, because I don't know if my talent was of the level of Love, where I was a guy who was averaging 20-10 a game and almost even 5 assists when he was leaving Minnesota in his final season. If after I've gotten a ring or two where I wouldn't want to try to go back, to getting those numbers so that I can be, really truly invested in the Hall of Fame, because right now he can't go. Even if he goes there and wins 2 or 3 more rings, his overall statistics aren't going to allow that to him. So, each player and each person needs to weigh what's important to them. And I don't know where Love stands on it, but it's a very interesting question that I'd love to, see answered in the coming season.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we're going to be kind of waiting hand, knee, and foot, so to speak, is the moves that David Griffin ultimately will have to make. Look, I personally believe that it would be great to see these guys play each other one more time in an NBA Finals, but I don't think that the rosters are going to look exactly the same kind of way, because then we could really look at who's improved what on part of their game to help put them in a position to do what the other team failed to do for this upcoming NBA Finals. But again, the NBA market, the free agency, the cap, and the TV deal have ultimately sealed our fate with our potential rematch, so to speak. We're talking like Frazier Ali type thing. I mean, that's what we were hoping for. Even if the Cleveland Cavaliers obviously won this, that we would have hoped to see the Golden State Warriors be in a position, to be in the NBA Finals once again. I mean, listen, man, the teams in the Western Conference are going to get better again. The Oklahoma City Thunder, if Durant makes the decision to stay, the San Antonio Spurs, I still think are going to be one move away from, or two, probably putting themselves right back in the thick of things. We don't know about the LA Clippers. The Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be a force to reckon with. So will be the Portland Trailblazers. And in the Eastern Conference, given the possible turnover that might happen for the Cavaliers, might open up an opportunity for teams like the Celtics and the Toronto Raptors, bringing those teams down, which now we can't make with certainty that these same two teams might find themselves playing in the NBA Finals in 2017.
Yeah, there's a very good possibility, but I think you're right that there would be, drastic changes, I think, to both their rosters. Golden State even probably more so, but you need to see what happens in free agency, obviously what happens in the trade market as well, too, as, players are definitely going to move around this summer and, see what money's being thrown out there for guys. And, if these two teams specifically get involved in the process themselves, JR is a big part of what they've done, for the Cavaliers. Does he come back? I think that's something you saw. RJ really just was an add-on, kind of just, hey, what kind of signing? Who cares about that? And then he came in and being a huge role for the Cavaliers in this season. So, really kind of taking the James Jones role away from James Jones, I think. And I'm very interested to see how these both teams matriculate throughout the summer. But I think if we get that rubber match next season, in 2017 NBA playoffs, then you can really kind of just say, okay, well, who has it? And this could really become a true rivalry, between a team like Golden State, with the glimmer, the glitz and the glamour, of California, versus the hard-working guys of Cavaliers. Even though LeBron has been, by many accounts, had a golden spoon in his mouth the entire time too. LeBron's worked very hard and comes from Akron, which isn't a glamorous city, and that's not a knock on that city at all. It's just, it kind of is what it is. If you can get a rivalry, and something that the NBA has been clamoring and missing for the last few years now between these two seemingly obscure cities, within the league, I think that'd be great for the association. But we can't count out the rest of the 28 teams in the NBA who are all trying to get better and get to the promised land themselves.
Well said, brother. Well said. And, what more can we say? This has been an awesome conversation, an awesome breakdown of clearly one of the classic NBA finals that we've seen in our generation. The Cleveland Cavaliers doing what no team has ever been able to do, which is come back from a 3-1 deficit and be able to win the NBA championship. More importantly, LeBron James fulfills his promise. He promised the Cleveland community, the Cleveland fans, that he is going to bring a title to that city, to that state, and that's exactly what he did. And no one can ever question the legend, the legacy, the man, the myth, so to speak, as far as what he is capable of and what he's capable of bringing to his people. So, once again, kudos to the Cleveland Cavaliers, kudos to LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, J.R. Smith, Richard Jefferson, Tristan Thompson, Tyronn Lue, everyone up and down the line responsible for allowing the Cleveland fans to finally bask in the glory of hoisting the O'Brien Trophy. And what more can we say about the Golden State Warriors? So close, but fell short. And the only thing that we can hope for is that both of these teams retool, which clearly is going to be evident by what they do come this week when the NBA draft kicks in and NBA free agency starts. As hopeful we'd like to be able to see these teams play one more time in what would be clearly a classic rematch, something that you would normally see out of Frazier and Ali. Be sure to check out The Baseline as we will continue our coverage of the NBA in the offseason. We're obviously going to be geared up for the NBA draft happening this week. We got our man Ed Isaacson joining on with us, NBA scout analyst. He does a great job for NBA draftblog.com. He also contributes for NBC Sports and Roto World. So he'll be on with us to help us break down the upcoming draft, and definitely check us out as we continue through the offseason for regular coverage and discussions of everything happening in the association, free agency, summer league, and before you know it, we'll be talking about the 2016-2017 NBA season. For The Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, and you know that we always encourage you to continue to give us ratings and comments and tweets as we continue to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the NBA. For The Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.